Good morning. It's another business day. Tuesday business is what we have planned out today. It's going to be 55 minutes of current and relevant business talks here in Business Morning. I'm Ini John Mekwa. We start as usual from the global space where oil prices slipped in early Asian trade on Tuesday as market participants are contemplating planned three-way talks among Russia, Ukraine, and the United States. And it's all to end the war in Ukraine, which could lead to an end to sanctions on Russian crude. So we look at the numbers and we see Brent down almost 1%. That's a deep fall for Brent, 0.92%, and that brings the price to $65.99 a barrel. WTI is also down almost the same percentage, $62.84 a barrel. Of course, we know that the big talk was yesterday between Ukraine and after Alaska's meeting, we had a Ukraine president meeting with President Trump and his vice. And following the talks with Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky and a group of European allies in the White House, US President Donald Trump has said that social media post that he called his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin and begun arranging a meeting between Putin, Zelensky, and of course himself to be followed by a trilateral summit among the three presidents. And Zelensky described his direct talks with Trump as very good and said that they had spoken about Ukraine's need for U.S. security guarantees. And of course, later on the program, we find out some of those demands that's now being weighed, especially by President Zelensky. In Nigeria, Nigeria's Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Gas, Mr. Ekperikpe has reaffirmed the country's commitment to clean and sustainable energy across Africa as it commissioned a 40,000 cubic meter liquefied petroleum gas vessel in South Korea. The vessel, owned by West Africa Gas Limited, a joint venture between NNPCL and Sahara Group, raises Nigeria's LPG fleet capacity to 162,000 cubic meters. Officials say that the move is expected to boost supply, enhance affordability, and strengthen regional access to cleaner fuel. And talking about cleaner fuel, we are settling on that later on the program. But now let's look at it from the global oil space, especially after that meeting and the expected three-part meeting that's supposed to come up. And we're going to have this conversation with the Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company, Mr. Bismarck Rouhani. Mr. Rouhani, good morning and welcome to the program. Good morning, and nice to see you this morning. Good to see you virtually, Mr. Rouhani. But I mean, that meeting yesterday, first of all, I would like to get your thoughts on what you think about the meeting in Alaska on Friday. A lot of people say we saw another side of President Trump.
No, I think that geopolitics and geoeconomics are coming together. And what's happening is that the geopolitical effect of understanding the importance of having stability in Europe and in Asia is very, very important. So what you saw was the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the European Union and OECD as one bloc, and Russia on the other hand, trying to get back to the former Soviet Union. I think we're just going through the motions. At the end of the day, I think there'll be peace, there'll be a truce, and then the markets will factor that in. But what I see right now is the markets have already factored in the fact that the peace will be achieved, not immediately, but over the next couple of weeks, and therefore you can see the price of oil hanging around $66. But yeah, what is more important in is that the Jackson Hole Symposium, which is a very, very important symposium, central bankers across the world is taking place on Friday. And Jerome Powell is going to be making a speech. That speech always gives you a guidance as to, one, what the Fed policy on interest rates is going to be in the next 2 or 3 quarters. Don't forget Jerome Powell's term is coming to an end in May 2026. So he's going to make a comment. And what is important for all of us are this. One, the job report, which was discredited by Mr. Trump, showed that jobs, the unemployment is higher in America. But then, once that job report came out, it was almost clear that the Fed will have to lower rates. Then, suddenly, we saw the PPE and the inflation data. The inflation data shows that the tariff effect is just beginning to kick in, and therefore inflation is right on the front burner in the United States. So what I think that Jerome Powell is going to be saying that, look, we would like to cut rates, but we have to wait for the data, for the next inflation data to show us, one, whether the tariff effect has kicked in or not. But quite frankly, I think we're going to be seeing a cut, maybe 25 basis points, and maybe one more before the end of the year after that. So the Fed rate will go from 4.5 down to over 4% at the end of the year. Now, what are the implications of this for us? One, as an oil-producing economy, the moment you cut rates in the US, the dollar gets weakened, and as the dollar weakens, the price of commodities denominated in dollars, i.e. oil and gold, will actually go in the other direction. So it means that we are going to see a higher oil price, and also we will see, and that will have an effect on domestic inflation and the capital markets all over the world. It also means that equities in the US markets will actually rise, and I think we've seen that already. That's why we are seeing record levels in the US equity markets.
I'm talking about domestic. I don't even know the pump price of PMS at the pump these days. It's up one day, it's down the other day. Sometimes it's kind of difficult to even keep track. So sometimes even if the change is a bit, but you see changes and you try to connect it to what's happening globally, and sometimes you just fail. What's going on?
No, I think that one, the domestic petroleum markets, refined product markets, is clearly, there's a price leader, which is Dangote. Dangote is pricing his product based on its cost, depending on the crude for Naira swap. Also depending on his economies of scale, because it's the largest single train refinery in the world. So every time he scales up, his average cost comes down and is able to pass on part of that to the market. What does that mean for his competitors? His competitors are importing in some cases and are unable to compete. So right now, he has brought down the depot price to 820, and I think that we are seeing the price of petroleum products, PMS, the pump price is now at 865 naira, which is much lower than what it was about 2-3 months ago, when it was as high as 925 naira in many parts of the country. Not only that, Dangote is also beginning to have uniform pricing across the country using the CNG powered trucks. So if that happens, one, Nigeria will witness a drop in the price of PMS. We will also witness uniform pricing across the Federation, and we also witness a knock-on effect on inflation. Because don't forget that we've seen inflation decline 4 months in a row, but the harvest season is much shorter than previous years, and there are fears that maybe in the August inflation that will come out, we might begin to see maybe a reversal of that trend. If that happens, then the Central Bank of Nigeria will be hard put to continue or to actually reduce interest rates at its meeting in 4 weeks from today.
So what's happening to domestic food prices now, especially the food?
No, domestic food prices, what we've seen in the last few days is what we call some flatlining. Apart from onions, which just spiked automatically yesterday, I think, from what we gather, all other things remain flat. But talking to the flour millers, I spoke to some of them yesterday. This time of the year, normally they're soft because of the harvest. So you have the price of yam coming down, the price of beans coming down, and those are the substitutes for bread in the market. But I understand the price of flour as of yesterday was 61,500 naira a bag for premium. For value flour, which is the cheaper brand, it's about 57,000 naira. But I'm told that we are going to be seeing an increase in the price of flour in October because the harvest this year is much shorter. So all told, flatlining for now. If we see an increase in price of food stuff in August because of the Mokwa flood, too, because of the the harvest that was not as robust as it was in the previous years, then we might begin to think twice. But generally speaking, we think the inflationary trend will be flatlining and then begin to reduce towards the end of the year. If that happens, then we might begin to see a gradual decline in interest rates, depending on how the Monetary Policy Committee outcome. For now, I still call it, and I think that the Central Bank of Nigeria will probably help go along by reducing interest rates by about 25 basis points. But it's too early to say. Too many things are happening. One, the GDP numbers are out. Two, we will have one more inflation data point before then. And then what happens in Jackson Hole will also, where Jerome Powell sets the tone for the rest of the world, will influence our own central bank as well, because our central bank governor, I think, must be in attendance at Jackson Hole this time.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Bismarck Rwani, for highlighting some of those very urgent economic issues at Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company.
Thank you for having me, Amy.
We ended in commodity space and we're picking up from there, but now we're being a bit specific, looking at the food and beverage sector and the impact that inflation has had on operations of businesses in that sector. But first of all, let's get to know that sector a bit. So we see that it contributes an estimated 22.5% of its value, and that's about 4.6% of the country's GDP. That's the food and beverage sector, and the food processing industry alone is valued at about $20 billion. So much big figures we have concerning Nigeria, but most of them remain as potential, unfortunately, and it makes up about 65% of Nigeria's manufacturing sector. Nigerians spend about 73% of their income on food and beverages. That's understandably. I mean, every human being needs to live. Nigeria is Africa's largest food market. However, its agricultural potential, the country still remains reliant on imported processed food and agriculture. So let's talk about, specifically, we're speaking here with the managing director of Cedar Divine Nigeria Limited, Mr. Mike Ewewe. He makes yogurts, one of those, I don't know if to call it luxurious.
Premium brand.
Premium brand at this time. Okay, good morning, but thank you so much for coming on the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Let me even start and just test this. So inflation numbers came out on the 15th. I wonder, do you follow inflation numbers? Do they make any impact? Does it relate? Do you relate to it? Does it affect you in any way? Let's start from there.
Yeah, actually, once in a while we check them up, but sometimes you find that they don't translate immediately to the life of the common man on the street. So that's the experience we actually
So, I mean, it really doesn't make any difference to you whether they say inflation is up or inflation is down, the number is this. And
sometimes it doesn't translate. That's the truth.
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, we might as well just stop.
Sometimes it doesn't.
All right, but tell us how it's been like in the food and beverages. It makes up about 73% of manufacturing in Nigeria, and we're talking about the real sector here. How has it been in your operations in the food and beverages sector in Nigeria in recent times?
Okay, thank you so much. I would say it's been interesting, and also it's been challenging. For us, at Cedar Divine Nigeria Limited, we started small, but we have grown within a short period of time. In the recent times, I can say that it's been quite tough. Tough in the sense that the prices of raw material are very unstable. Because once the exchange rate changes, it affects the raw material, and you can't go back to the market and tell the customer the price has just changed. So it's been quite challenging, and a number of other huge gap in terms of infrastructure are also affected. But on the positive side, we have a very lucrative population. So the business is good, and the market is there. That's actually the truth.
But for someone like you who makes yogurt, I thought most of your raw materials would be locally sourced.
Okay, well, it should be, but I think currently, no yogurt producing company in Nigeria can tell you that they use purely locally sourced milk, which is a major raw material, because our environment actually doesn't help that. The cows we have don't give enough milk. The temperature does not really encourage that. So a lot still have to buy the imported raw material mixed with the local one to be able to get the volume they want. So right now, it's still a hybrid situation.
Is it about that, or is it just about the perception that, Nigeria, maybe Nigerian product is not good enough or doesn't taste well? Is it about that?
No, no, no. It's not about that. I remember a couple of months ago, we had a meeting with one of the big companies who would think that because they have all the resources, they could backward integrate and have a lot of cattle farms. But the experience they also narrated was such that their yield was so minimal. And then in the area where they even had a farm because of insecurity, they lost the staff and their cows were carted away and all of that. So there are a lot of issues that are not encouraging enough production in that area.
So, it's structural issues of insecurity, because, if you just check now, you see Nigeria has maybe the largest cattle in Africa and everything like that. And in spite of this, we still have to import dairy into the country, which is a sad one. But dealing with the issue of insecurity, how much impact do you think that could reduce this dependence on imported raw materials for you?
Yeah, actually, I think that would have helped if we have a stable security situation. Up north, like places like Jos, that's Plateau State, and a number of those states in the north where the temperature is quite cold, I believe cows will yield better there, milk, all right, as against the south that will have very hot temperature. But up north, because of the huge security situation, people are not encouraged to go into those kind of farming because of the attacks and all of that. So I think it contributed a lot to it. But outside of that, from what we have seen, it still looks like some of the cattle we have, look at the approach. A cattle is moving from here to probably another 20 kilometers and all of that. How will it be able to produce enough milk? It's not. So the system itself is also not even encouraging a good production of the milk.
So you would be in support of ranching?
That would be the best. That would be the best.
And we have the Ministry of Livestock now. I wonder if you hear anything about that coming from the Ministry of Livestock.
Yes, I've heard about that. But in our environment, when such come up, it takes time for it to trickle down and you begin to see the effect of it. So we are following up to see how that helps. But I believe it will help a lot. It will help.
Hopefully.
Yes.
So apart from insecurity, when we look at your line of work, you have very sensitive raw materials. That means the issue of storage and preservation also is very key for you to have a good product, that's consumable at the end of the day. Yeah,
that's another area. If you visit our factories, you're going to find more than 4 different generators that we run, because yogurt is one of the very sensitive products. You are expected to produce, transfer it to your cold room, move them in terms of distribution through cooling vans. But you have two major challenges. The one, there is inconsistency of power at the moment. So we use a lot of diesel, and then in the cost of distribution, you can find a truck on the road for a week. It's stuck somewhere because of traffic, and that aspect of the road is bad. So that also is affecting a lot in that sector. So it's quite challenging, but having been in the business for 20 years, we try to find a way to go around it through networking, leveraging our relationship, and then having distribution center where the products are moved to, and from there they are redistributed. That's how we
talking about energy, what about renewables? A lot of people seem to be going that way now. Is it too expensive, or it's not available for you? Yeah,
renewable is good, all right, but if you are going to build up a renewable source of energy for industrial use, the cost is enormous. The cost is enormous.
But on a long term, they say it makes sense.
On a long term, it makes sense, but that also brings us back to our funding system. How do you fund a project on a long term where you're going to pay over 40% interest rate? How are you going to keep it? Manufacturing do not yield high margin. It's little margin. So if you're going to go on a long-term funding of a project and the interest rate is so high, that's business suicidal. You're not going to be able to survive it. So that's another problem. It's another problem.
And then you talked about logistics, when you said, maybe you want to do a delivery, stock and traffic and all of that. I guess you're talking about the issue of roads, for instance.
Yes, I have a number of trucks that move our products across the country. I've had time when drivers sent me photographs and video of them cooking on the express. There's no movement. Road is stuck. All right?
What areas would that be?
I mean, majorly if you look at it from Benin to Warri, then to Port Harcourt. That axis is quite tough right now. And then they also give me a report of between, I think, a lorry going towards the north. Those two positions, they keep sending me pictures. And sometimes you find there was a day they were in a particular place for 3 days before they go back. So that's another major setback. But I'm sure, I think some area they said they're working on them. I'm sure when they are done, it can ease our distribution.
And I can imagine what rail would do.
That would have been wonderful. That would have been wonderful. But that's not fully where it should be right now. Yeah.
So in all of this, how does it feed into your pricing system over the years? Because some of these things have become luxurious. Especially things something like yogurt. I mean, you want to think twice before you go into the shop that you want to buy yogurt.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, like I said before, yogurt today is very expensive. One of the reasons is all of these factors. I remember 2013, 2014, we were buying a bag of milk for 13,000, 14,000, 17,000. Right now, we're buying a bag of milk for about 165,000, 170,000, depending on the brand. But we try to use the best we can find. So that affects. They look at, we're buying diesel, maybe over 100 naira, but right now we're buying diesel over 1,000 naira per liter. So you use diesel for your trucks. You also use diesel for your generator to run operation. So when you put all this together and then look at the length of time the truck will be on the road to supply and come back, all of them make the product very expensive. That's the truth.
And what would you say about the consumer's trend, with these changes? How have consumers been reacting to it?
Yes, if you look at it very well, the reaction has been quite sharp. Consumption has really gone down. I remember that there used to be a time, what a staff used to sell in a day, a salesperson. Honestly, about 7 salespersons will not sell it now in a day. Because you have to virtually go every nooks and cranny looking for those who can afford the product. In fact, that was one of the reasons why we spread into different states in the country. Because we saw that the population we're serving was reducing and reducing. So it's okay. Those who can afford it, go look for them in every state in the country. So we started spreading to various states. That was the strategy we were able to use to survive. So right now, it's not. It's like a middle-class product. That's the truth.
And that, of course, the spread will also cost you more. So your overhead also increases and feeds into the price of the product again.
A lot.
The consumer bears it at the end. But thank you so much for sharing your experience with us this morning. The Managing Director of Cedar Divine Nigeria Limited, Mr. Mike Ewewe.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure being here.
We heard a manufacturer, the guest that just left the studio, complain about the issue of power and what it does. Let's give you a bit more statistics on that. Talking about energy poverty in the country, well, statistics show that over 85 million people lack access to the national grid. I guess that's no longer news in Nigeria. In the rural areas, fewer than 30% of the people have access to reliable electricity. And World Bank has said that Nigeria loses about $29 billion annually because of this lack of access to reliable electricity in the country. And for alternative, Nigerians spend an estimated $10 billion on maintaining petrol generator in the country. Isn't that a lot of money? $10 billion. Imagine if that poll was put together, what we could do with it. Manufacturers Association of Nigeria says that energy costs about 35 to 40% of total production expenses. And so we're looking at transitioning to cleaner energy. But we heard that the cost of transitioning seems to be a discouraging factor. We've had that conversation before. Let's delve into that and see if we can eliminate this energy poverty in the country and save some of those $10 billion that's being used to maintain petrol generators, among others. And I'm glad to have my namesake in the studio, Ini Abimbola.
Thank you.
I've been looking forward to this conversation. It's good to be talking to another Ini.
I know. I'm so excited. Thank you so much.
Good to have you. So Ini is she is the Vice President of Sustainability Practitioners Association of Nigeria. She's also the founder of TESOL Praxis, a former CEO, handed over to a successor, and now stays as the founder. Good to have you in the studio. So we saw those numbers, what Nigeria is losing from the World Bank. I mean, I know you have generator in your house somewhere, and then you're either doing diesel and solar.
Diesel as well.
Imagine, you know, and I think the governor of Lagos said it that if we could pool all the resources of what people are spending on these alternatives, we could actually power up Nigeria. Absolutely. But there's no coordinating factor and all of that. But we have sustainability practitioners here. I think you are going to bring that to the table.
I think the conversation has been on for quite a while. And then, of course, the question still remains, with this target that we have, are we ever going to be able to achieve it? Achievability is really based on a number of things.
That's the net zero carbon emissions target of 20.
So Nigeria's target of 2060, for instance, very bold, aligns with global commitments, but the pace is very slow. We're still heavily reliant on fossil fuel, as it were, very weak infrastructure. The grid is dying and waking up every single day. And then, of course, there's very limited financing in that particular area. So yes, the clear policies, the energy transition plan that we have is very good. But of course, then we need to enhance renewable energy, as it were. One of the key things that I always say is that affordability is very key. If we really want to be able to meet that pace, it has to be a sprint. It definitely doesn't have to be at the pace that we are going right now. So achievability is possible, but definitely not at the pace that we are going.
So you talked about affordability and availability and the policy being beautiful. But you know, it seems a lot of Nigerians, we talked on average Nigeria, they've lost a lot of trust in policies because we've heard so many policies in the country, but when it comes to workability, you understand, it comes to another thing. But you also talked about the affordability. And a lot of people say, the problem is not money, the problem is have the idea. And the private sector will bring in the money. So what's stopping the private sector going?
I'm not sure that it works that way. So there has to be some level of stronger political will and direction. So the government has to give the direction. So financing is not a problem if the plan is very clear. So yes, you have an idea. An idea is good. An idea is 10 a dozen, if you will. But the idea that is able to translate to what I would call tangible impact, if you will. So Africa wants to be able to meet just energy, you know what I mean. However, being able to finance that, the affordability comes from the fact that there's financing for it. And financing will come from a mix. It cannot be from one source. So if we're saying government has to do a lot of things, but government won't be able to do it alone. So yes, government can bring the money, government revenue, there can be green bonds, there can also be us leveraging on Nigeria's sovereign wealth fund, if you will. But then there also has to be the play of private sector. So private sector, whether domestic or foreign, private capital, if you will. And then, of course, the ability to also jump into all the available global funds, bilateral donor support, and all of that. Then you bring in all of this money. It's now possible for renewable energy to be affordable. Target is nothing if we're not also moving at the speed that we need to move. And one of the things that we need to understand is that energy poverty is Africa's silent crisis. It is really eating deep. And what we are doing right now, even with all the diesel, biomass, all of the things we're using, renewable energy, there are still people in the rural and underserved communities that struggle to have light. So we are now making them choose between darkness and dirty fuels. So something has to give, and the sooner the better for us.
Yeah, and reports show that we need about $27.7 billion annually. Annually. I wonder where we'll get that from.
So again, that's the point that I made around it being a mix. So government revenue, private sector as well, international donor funds. The world can ask Africa to be go away from fossil fuel without also being able to put the money on the table. So it has to be a mix. The money has to come from different places.
So do you think that, for instance, in Nigeria, the new Electricity Act that's supposed to bring in, empower states more and allow states to work closely with the private sector. Do you think that could be perhaps a solution?
I think that if we are able to really use it as the plan directs, I think it could be a game changer, if you ask me. So states, for instance, are also able to pull resources from private sector, from international donor funds, and be able to, I think if we just have one what best practice, if you know what I mean. So a state really driving this and getting that funding that it needs from different means. So government will bring its own international bilateral donor support, private sector, public-private partnerships, the green bonds that we have. And one state is able to show that this is possible and this is doable. I think it will also ginger a lot of other states to be able to come up with
What
that.
would that look like? Would it look like the governor of a state coming out to say, maybe announce incentives? What would it really look like?
I think for getting the private sector, it has to be. So whether it's domestic or international funding from the private sector, for instance, it has to come with some level of incentives and, of course, some de-risking mechanisms as well, so they are comfortable to be able to put their money in and are sure that, they'll also be able to get a return on investments. Return on investments, return on assets, whatever it may be. Nobody wants to put in money and not be able to. A lot of private sector organizations or even international donor agencies are happy to put in, but the plan has to be very clear. And understanding also that Nigeria also has some level of reputation that we also need to manage. So again, that's important, that the plan has to be very clear. Investors need to be able to see that this plan works. And then, of course, there are lots of regulatory bottlenecks as well that might also make this a bit difficult. So it's not just enough for the governor to come up and say, look, we're inviting. There are quite a number of other things that need to be at play.
I hear the bottleneck part because there are so many things and policies that we sit down here and speak all the English. And then when it's time, and people want to, like for instance, the AFCFTA, I've spoken to someone who wanted to participate and says getting a license is a headache. And yet, we say we want to drive intra-African trade. So I think the time for openness and sincerity and shining the light on every step of implementation is now. If we really want to get these things done, it's not just about the policy, the beautiful ones.
And so the policies are there. The policies are beautiful from A to Z. They're well done, but implementation is really where the problem begins to so whether we want to achieve it or not is not a question. We want to. We need it. Nigeria, for instance,
we say we want to. Do we really want to?
Well, I think that the need is great and we want to, but do we have enough political will to drive it to a logical conclusion and be able to show that as a best practice in Africa? Nigeria has all what it takes, but what will we do differently? And I think that's where the question is. What will we do differently? Or what should we do differently to be able to see this thing become a reality, even if on a test basis? You know what I mean? Let's test it and say, oh, it works. So what do we need to maybe expand the scope? You know what I mean? So that's why I said, take one state that has the political will, that has the maybe, what would I say, best practice antecedent.
I vote for Lagos.
Well, I vote for Lagos. I was born, bred, buttered in Lagos, so I will start with Lagos. And because Lagos has always been,
on Governor,
you know what I mean. Lagos has always been a trailblazer. So let's see, can we start? Can we use Lagos State, for instance, as a test case to say this is achievable? If Lagos State can do it, with the kind of large communities that we have in Lagos, then it is possible for other states.
Okay, so let us Nigerians send you as the vice president of Sustainability Practitioners Association of Nigeria. We are sending you to Lagos State. Please, can you help us tell Lagos that we believe in Governor Sanwo-Olu, and we want him to be once again a trailblazer and show us how this thing can be done. I know that Lagos was one of those first states to domesticate at least. Work
Yeah.
on domesticating.
Yeah.
And when you talk about PPP in power, even when former Governor Fashola was here, we have, some
very
stations.
Strong, yes.
Even Alausa, I think it's being run by PPP and all. So please, can you help us tell Governor so?
I'm sure the relevant authorities and the governor himself is listening. I strongly believe that it's something that the state can do, particularly in serving as a best practice case. They've gone around. I see the governor traveling a lot, looking at best practice, what's happening in other, countries. And I think that with what they've been able also to do in transportation, for instance, with the rail,
and they're also working on produce, for Lagos,
so I think that the opportunity for Lagos to be able to take this on very strongly, it's there, and we're here to support actually. Sustainability Professionals Institute of Nigeria, we're here to give the support. We've worked with some agencies of government to also be able to help them to define certain roadmaps. But here we're here to support them, and we actually trust that Lagos State can be the flag bearer.
Your next meeting, please. You need to. But even while we are hopeful and laughing here, in the rural area is actually a different picture. It's much worse. People are going. When we talk about real energy poverty. It's really, really bad there. People still have to use firewood and things like that. And it does seem like getting down to them is going to take much, much longer. So again, and talking about sustainability, this is causing a lot of harm to our environment, our climate, health. All of this is feeding into that.
So I was very excited. I think it was 2 years ago when we talked about the year of gas and the whole idea.
Decade of gas.
Decade of gas. And the whole idea was really to begin to break this down, even to the rural and underserved communities, to understand that we could go away from using fossil fuel, all of these dirty fuels like firewood and all of that. But I don't think that we're able to trickle down to the grassroots as much as possible. And so what we're doing is that we're making people choose between darkness, as I said earlier, and dirty fuels because of affordability. So when we say that we want energy poverty to end, it has to get to the poorest households, or else we have not achieved. And I think that that's what is also very important. As much as we want to do this, are we also thinking about the bottom of the pyramid? Will they be able to afford this? And what will that mean if they are able to afford it? So yes, we're talking about, CNG, we're talking about gas.
LPG.
Gas, we have abundant gas reserves. And for me, that could actually be a bridge to renewables, while at the same time, we're also removing some level of dependency on diesel, as it were. But right now we're having to depend on the whole works to be able to survive. So what would it take for us to see that change? We've seen a lot of people get on solar. We've seen a lot of people get off the national grid because of cost. But it is also still very expensive. So for me, affordability is what will drive this energy poverty to a point where we're not talking about it anymore.
And some people talk about cost of transitioning. I mean, the last manufacturer I talked about this. It's a major consideration.
So if I already have my machines running on diesel and
why should I go?
And then you're asking me to spend maybe twice that amount to be able to move to renewable. I'm going to think about my profit. I'm going to think about my operational costs. I'm going to think about how will the business survive if we have to spend that much money. So what will happen to these other
structure that you already
infrastructure that we already have? So I think that it really needs to be thought through. For most organizations, they're happy to transit, but it has to be a gradual transition. And then that's where, again, affordability comes to play.
Affordability at the beginning and at the end, even at the middle.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on the program. Namesake Inya Bimbola, founder and former CEO of Petrol Praxis and Vice President of Sustainability Practitioners Association of Nigeria. Really good speaking to you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
It's the last lap of Business Morning, and Ladi has the show now. Ladi, take us round.
So it's just one innie I'm speaking to.
Ladi, you don't know what you're missing. You need to get another Ladi on the show. It's so much fun. Yeah.
It's nice having a double.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll explore
and it's
that.
not AI.
Not AI. Fantastic. I'll explore it at some point. Well, let's get a check of what's playing out in global space now. There's hope for progress in ending the war in Ukraine. That was rekindled yesterday as U.S. President Donald Trump And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, they met in Washington, striking a more conciliatory tone after a previously tense encounter. President Trump pledged U.S. support for Ukraine's security and floated possible trilateral talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin, though fundamental disputes, especially over Russian-occupied territory, remain unresolved. Take a listen.
I can never say that. It's never the end of the road. People are being killed, and we want to stop that. So I would not say it's the end of the road. No, I think we have a good chance of doing it. It's been almost 4 years now that a lot of people were killed last week. A lot of people last week. I mean, millions of people killed, but a lot of people last week for whatever reason. A big number, a lot of soldiers, both on both sides. And I know the president, I know myself, and I believe Vladimir Putin wants to see it ended.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. If I can, first of all, thank
Please.
you for invitation, and thank you very much for your efforts, personal efforts to stop killings and stop this war. Thank you. And using this opportunity, many thanks to your wife, First Lady of the United States. She sent a letter to Putin about our children, abducted children, and my wife, she, First Lady of Ukraine, she gave the letter. It's not to you, to your wife.
Oh, I want it.
Yeah. So we are saying this sensitive topic. Yes, please. And thanks to our partners and that you supported this format. That after our meeting we can have leaders who are around us, UK and France, Germany, Italy, Finland, EU, NATO. I mean, all partners around Ukraine supporting us. Thanks them, and thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you very much for being here.
All right, so all eyes on the trilateral meeting at this point. More expectations coming up, and we'll get what's playing out in Europe later on Business Incorporated. To other stories now, we see Canada's housing market showed unexpected resilience in July as housing starts that rose 4% from the previous month, according to data from the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. The seasonally adjusted annualized pace climbed to 294,000 units, up from a revised 283,000 units in June, defying expectations of a slowdown in residential construction amid high interest rates and affordability pressures. The stronger than anticipated figures highlights ongoing demand in key urban centers, even as economists warn of persistent headwinds for builders in Canada. And we'll take it on to the UK now. We see British grocery price inflation that eased slightly to 5.0% in the 4 weeks to August, and down from about 5.2% in July, according to fresh data from the market researcher World Panel by Numerator. The modest decline marks the second consecutive month of slowing price growth and offers some relief to households still grappling with elevated food bills, while staples such as meat, chocolate and coffee continue to see some fastest price rises. Categories including champagne, pet food and sugary snacks registered declines, underlining the uneven nature of the easing trend. Analysts say the latest figures provide an important gauge of consumer spending, their spending power ahead of the critical autumn retail season. And in Asia, Japan's SoftBank has struck a major bet on U.S. semiconductor giant Intel, investing $2 billion for a 2% stake, even as the chip maker struggles to regain competitiveness. The move comes along reports that the Trump administration may take a 10% equity stake in Intel by converting subsidies under the CHIPS Act, a step that would make Washington its largest shareholder. Despite the high-profile backing, Intel shares slid 5% on Tuesday, while SoftBank stock also retreated 4% from record highs. So investors weren't so pleased with that. Then Malaysia's exports, that increased by 6.8% in July compared to the same month last year, significantly outperforming economists' expectations of a 3.9% decline, according to government data released today. The unexpected growth was primarily driven by a surge in shipments of electrical and electronic products. The Statistics Department and Trade Ministry data also showed that trade with Singapore saw a substantial increase, with exports to the neighboring country jumping 22.2%. Exports to China also performed well, rising 6.8% year-on-year. On the import side, Malaysia recorded a 20.6% increase in capital goods imports. However, other import categories showed declines, with intermediate goods falling 17.8% and consumption goods dropping 5%. All right, so there you have it. Those are the top stories right there in the global space, and investors are still watching out at this point. We're seeing the likes of Bitcoin still trying to find, its ground at this point, and it's all about geopolitics.
Yeah.
And Jackson Hole. That's symposium.
Jackson Hole on Friday.
Everybody wants to hear what Jerome Powell, has to say. This is going to be his last one, as the Fed chair. So all eyes on that at this point.
Yeah, but I think more eyes on the tripartite meeting.
Oh, yes.
That is a very
also
big
hot
one.
right
And
now.
Ladi, I was looking at some of the condition that President Zelensky has to deal with giving up Crimea.
Right.
I believe Crimea used to be part of Russia.
Yeah, it used to be part of Russia at some point.
It should be fair, a fair condition.
Yeah.
And then the condition of not joining NATO. And a lot of people question that to say, oh, what about their own security if Russia wakes up tomorrow and they're too weak to withstand that and all of that.
Right.
But I think it's a lot of things for President Zelensky to consider because as himself and President Trump said there, everybody wants the killing to stop.
Right.
No country grows when there's war going on in it, but what's the price that you have to pay?
And that's why analysts still see so much uncertainty around, these meetings. Now, even though, President Trump says it's productive, according to him, but it's all a wait to see.
Yeah, we did not hear a lot of President Zelensky's voice in that meeting.
Yeah.
But it was friendlier.
It was more friendly.
There was no attack. Oh, there was an attack on the outfit also.
It wasn't really an attack. It was more like a throwback.
Okay, all right.
And he also, President Zelensky actually told the reporter that you're wearing the same suit you wore at the last meeting, but it was better.
Yeah, it was better. The atmosphere was much better. We'll see what happens from that side.
Wait and see.
All right, Ladi. Okay, so just before we go, let's tell you that the market yesterday in Nigeria closed in the positive. It was just slightly positive. We've gotten really greedy in this market. We've seen very big gains, and we're expecting it to stay that way, but nothing really stays that way. So we see that the all-share index went up 0.07%. I think about 6 billion is what was added to the market cap to bring it to 91.56 trillion naira. And we still see profit taking on insurance. They've gained a lot, so they need to give up some of those parts. Activity was mostly positive compared to what we had on Friday. Top gainers were UPDC, ICO Insurance, and Lotus Hall. Top losers, Stanbic, IBTC and PZ, and NEM Insurance everywhere. Top trades, mostly profit-taking, Universal Insurance, Lincolnshire, and also Champion. Those were the top trades. We'll see what the market looks like at 1:30 when Ladi will be back here to give you updates from the world of business. I'm Mini John Mekwa, wishing you the very best of the rest of your day.